Welcome to Cinemaphile, where we showcase the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers and talk to them about their work. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar. You can listen to other interviews by going to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar at Spotify. Ebs Burnough made his directorial debut with the documentary The Capote Tapes. He is back with KEROUAC'S Road, The Beat of a Nation. Through the lens of Kerouac's novel On the Road, the documentary follows a few different Americans of various backgrounds on their own personal journeys traveling across the country. With the help and assistance of actors such as Matt Dillon, Josh Brolin, Michael Imperioli, and Kamau Bell, they discuss their personal relationship with Kerouac's On the Road novel and how it formed their relationship with their outlook on life. We're honored to have with us today the director and producer of KEROUAC'S Road, The Beat of a Nation, Ebs Burnough. Ebs, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been a long time since I read On the Road. Reminded me so much of what I was attracted to about it, and the sense of adventure, the sense of freedom. Tell me a little bit about the genesis for this particular project. How did you decide to move forward with this?
Someone had come to me with the concept of saying, would I be interested in doing something on Jack Kerouac? And the short answer at the time was no, because I just didn't feel, well, first of all, I didn't know that much about Jack Kerouac as a person. And so I had in my head a vision of who that person. I knew he'd gone to Columbia. I knew the Beats. I had read a lot of his work. On the Road had never really registered with me. I thought it was a brilliant book, but when I read it at 16 in Tallahassee, Florida, as a black, not yet out of the closet kid, I didn't feel like I could really go on the road in that same way. And so as I continued thinking about Kerouac, and I started thinking how interesting for me it would be to broaden the people who can be on the road today versus who could be on it in 1957. I mean, in an era before, yeah, women's health, before the pill, before, before civil rights. So how have we grown? And I think that was really the impetus for me when I dug in to say, oh gosh, it's a brilliant book. The concept is sweeping and personal and still resonates today. How can we open it up a little bit?
Yeah, and there is something so relatable, so much of a connection to the human experience to talk about migrating, to moving, to exploring. There's so much in the text that is, again, it's just part of us, it's our human nature. Somebody just recently said, and I hadn't heard it quite before, this put this way, but the history of humans is the history of migration. And this is a small scale version, an American version of what I just mentioned. It's the idea of movement being freedom, freedom being expression.
That's right. And I think it's really important to me because we're all on our own individual road,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we
Yeah.
are each on our own journey, and yet we are like cells and we bump into one another. And part of what's magical about the road itself is that ability and that individuality that is still combined with community. And I think in an era where we're constantly on our phones, we're constantly on social media, we have kind of lost that ability to find community. And I think a lot of community is found on the road. And I think this process has taught me to put my phone down and actually walk outside or look outside, look out the window and take in my surroundings.
Yeah, and there's a randomness to the universe that we explore, we come in contact with when we're on the road or when we step outside of our apartment building. And is that, fair way to put it, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
There's randomness to it. And I think part of human nature and certainly part of being an American is getting out of where you are. And, the road, both physical and metaphorical, really does mean whether you're on the road to a new job or you're on the road to see grandma or you're on the road getting out of a bad relationship or whatever the case may be, the road gives us a sense not just of freedom, but it also gives us a sense that there is a future in front of us. And that is really, I think, empowering.
Bringing the people that you brought into the project, Michael Imperioli essentially, in many ways, narrates the film by virtue of inhabiting the character of Jack Kerouac, which I just love. I love his voice. I loved his bearing, if you will, in the film. And also Josh Brolin, Matt Dillon, Natalie Merchant, who I'm a big fan of, to see them in the film, talking about the impact it had. All of the people that you bring in that we're familiar with, but the people I wasn't familiar with were the people in Jack Kerouac's life that are still with us, who offer a perspective, as well as others, and we'll get into that as well. It's a wonderful cast of people that you have here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's a very special cast, and I think they all were so generous of spirit and willing to share the impact that Kerouac and On the Road and the book have had on their lives. It was really special.
In terms of the people that I mentioned, the more notable people, people we would know, the other people that are in the film flesh out the idea. The other ones they are able to comment in very learned ways, understandable ways to the impact of On the Road had on them. But the people we get to follow are so intriguing, and I don't know how you found them, or this kind of talk a little bit about bringing them into the project.
I think the bringing the kind of everyday real people into the project was certainly the most complex part of the journey, finding the right people. And I had the ability to work with the, amazing Carmen Cuba, who is an amazing casting director, who when I met her, I said, would you help me with this? And she said, I don't really do documentaries. And she's done, every feature film you can imagine. And she said, but I do love documentaries and I'm intrigued with On the Road and what you're talking about. And so she and her team really were sending my producing partner Eliza Heinmarch and I, hundreds of people that were, they were scouring websites and van life sites and finding people that were on the road. And so for me, that was very much, I think the book for me is very much it's a coming of age story. And the beginning of the book is one that our protagonist is quite young and excited and impressionable. And it's the beginning of life. And then the middle of the book, it's kind of when you see things that aren't quite so sunny, It's not always sunny on the road. It rains, it snows, and that kind of is that midlife component. And then the end of the book is really kind of growing up and being an adult. And so I wanted to really be able to show that through the stories, the real life stories that we were telling and trying to weave that in with Kerouac's life and with the book.
Yeah, and that is again, it's been a minute since I've read On the Road, but it has been in many ways become a touchstone in our culture. So many road movies now are some version of On the Road. We've seen so many different updated versions of this story, but what I think people and you bring forward in this documentary film is he wasn't a hero, in some ways a broken man, in other ways swept up by fame, swept up by the expectations that come along with fame. We
Yes.
we get all of that. Is that a fair way to
I
put
think
it?
that's a very fair assessment, and I think he wasn't perfect. None of us are, and the book was written in 1957, and so even reading it today, there are moments that there are pages where you cringe, but I think we can hold two things in our head at the same time. I think we can recognize the brilliance and the relevance and the meaningfulness of it as well as saying, okay, well, we don't talk like that anymore, or or that's misogynistic, and but we can hold all of that at once, and I think that's one of the things that makes this book in particular still so vibrant.
Yeah, I really appreciated the context you provide for people, and you just it's alluded to in the documentary, and that is many people reading the book now. And I thought Natalie Merchant was particularly trenchant in her observations about the
Yes.
book,
Yes.
and in that regard. And but then she comes back to there are these passages. There are these gems of observational writing in him in the book that make it something that people should continue to value. Understanding, as you just put it, there's a context that would not be something that would be received the same way today.
That's right.
Because
That's right. It's fact. And I think we just have to be open to that and hold on. Natalie Merchant in particular Natalie agreed to be interviewed, and she just kind of lights up the screen, and what she has to say is so valuable. And later on, after I'd interviewed her, months later, I sent her a cut of the film, and she watched it, and she wrote me back, and she said, I wrote a song. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, it inspired me to write a song. And so the closing song is an original that Natalie wrote after seeing, she wasn't commissioned to do it. I didn't ask her to do it. She watched a cut of the film and was, inspired by the book, by the film to write that song. And so it's very, very, very special to me having that there from her.
And it's also appropriate, I think, to point out that the song that she wrote as a member of 10,000 Maniacs
Hey,
was
Jack Kerouac.
yeah, exactly. And a
Exactly.
lot of people took that as a sort of a touchstone of inspiration to go out and read on the road, and or became intrigued by his life story. So that's a nice closing that circle a little bit in terms of her own experience as well.
No, it's incredibly, it's really, really special and incredibly meaningful. And I think the song to me is really an anthem for the time that we live in right now. And so it's what she's done with it echoes where we are today. So it's very special.
Just want to remind our listeners that we're speaking with Ebs Burnough, and he's the director of KEROUAC'S Road, The Beat of a Nation. The film is currently in a theatrical run, so be looking for it in a theater near you wherever you are, and after that it will be available streaming online. Be looking for this film. Again, the film is KEROUAC'S Road, The Beat of a Nation, and there's so much about the film that is literate and literary in the telling, and also inspires us by virtue of literature, inspiring our imagination. Particularly with the people that you have in the film who knew Jack, it really provides this context that I just thought was remarkable, and also it humanizes him. It humanizes the time that he grew up in as well.
Well, thank you. And I will say Joyce Johnson, who dated Kerouac and was with him when On the Road came out and wrote the incredible book Minor Characters, which really focused on the women of the era. But, another just full circle when you were saying it just reminded me, Natalie Merchant, when she wrote Hey Jack Kerouac, she wrote it after having read Minor Characters, but she'd never met Joyce Johnson until we premiered at Tribeca. So that was her first time meeting the woman who had inspired her to write the song. So that was also a really full circle moment.
I talked earlier about the people that are not the well-known that
Mhm.
are in the film. And I have to go a couple of people that really just jumped out at me. Diane or Diana. Is it Diane
Diana.
or Diane? Yeah.
Diana.
Diana, what a story she has to tell. And again, talk about a full circle kind of story that she has to tell. And Amir Staten, who and his family in Philadelphia, and how I mean, everybody in the film is good, but I was just so drawn to those two stories that you tell
Yeah.
in the film.
It's really, I think, one of the things that we worked really hard on, and again, to the point of casting, quote unquote, casting, is it's really hard to cast people who aren't, actors. But, again, the book for me is the life cycle to a degree. I mean, we start out at the beginning of the book and it's hopeful and youthful and impressionable. And that's very much a mirror. And the middle of the book is there's rain and it's not always easy and he's in different places and it's not always fun and he's growing up. And Tino, who came to America at the age of 2 from Cuba and
Yeah.
did 2 tours of duty in Iraq, and is quite conservative and married to someone who is not at all conservative, quite liberal. And, their last child has gone to college, and so they've sold everything and are traveling around the country in a Sprinter van. That's kind of the middle. And then Diana and her desire to make amends with a father that she's only seen 3 times in 50 years and a very complex relationship, for her to be 68 and for him to be 91, I think, and for her to be making that trek across country with her dog, in essence, to say goodbye to him on her terms. It's the life cycle, and it's what I think still makes the book vibrant and beautiful, and what I hope the film brings into the 21st century and shows the remaining relevance of the book.
I'll end with this. There's a moment in the film where the scholars at the Kerouac scholar, I think she's the one
Jean
who
Christophe. Yes.
yes, where she says when the book was translated into French, it was on the path.
Yes, it's Jean Christophe, the man. He says that.
I'm the man.
The
Okay.
path. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And thank you. And that just light bulbs went off in my head when I heard that. It's the road, the path. You could make the argument the same thing. No, they're not especially in the context of this book. They are not.
That's right. No, they're not. And I think that we are all on our own individual journeys, and the joy, the magic of life and human nature is that we bump up against one another, and
Yeah.
regardless of politics or gender or identity, there is more that we have in common. There's more that brings us together than there is that divides us. And so I think we're all in search of community. And the road really does help us build that community. So I keep saying to my kids, I'm like, put your phone down and look out the window or go outside and experience the world as it is. And I'm trying to do the same thing,
Yeah.
to experience the world as it is right now, because we can get so caught up in our own little silos that we miss the forest for the trees.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more. Again, the film is called Kerouac's Road, The Beat of a Nation. It continues to influence generations of people and will probably as long as people are reading books. The film does such a wonderful job of pulling us into the story, giving us the full spectrum of the book, its impact, its flaws, and to hear it from people who it really matters to. And it's a wonderful experience. Thank you, Ebs Burnough, for your time today. Once again, the film is called Kerouac's Road, The Beat of a Nation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile. I'm your host, Mike Kaspar, and you can listen to previous interviews as well as special programming, or you can subscribe by going to Cinemaphile, that's F-I-L-E, with Mike Kaspar, at Spotify. Until next time, thank you for listening.